So as I said, we're going to discuss World War I and World War II. So that Nadia, so you can discuss it. You can have the American perspective, which if
Yeah,
I
thank
can.
you. I
I'm
really
no
want
expert,
to.
and I don't really know the battles of these two wars. I've never been a big guy in memorizing battles and dates and things. But let's look at big picture. Generally, how did they go? World War I, World War II. What caused them? I like big picture stuff. Not really the fine details of dates and generals and who won this battle. And if anything, I suppose what I'm giving you, I think, is the American perspective on it. So you can, Nadia, you can interrupt me at any time. Tolulope, you can interrupt me at any time, ask any questions, or if you have a different perspective on something, we can do that. So let's discuss World War I and World War II kind of together, one at a time, but together today, and see what we come up with. Okay, so World War I. Here's a picture. Now, when I do this presentation, it's I do it real rapidly. American Revolution, or the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, which of course Civil War is 1860s. Now World War I, you're coming through time. Notice it's a black and white photo. It doesn't look modern, but if we were looking at, comparing it to say the American Revolution, they do look pretty modern, right? World War I ended just about 100 years ago. A little bit more than 100 years ago. So it happens a century ago. So there's things about it that are modern and things that we would, definitely not think of as modern. So we'll look at some pictures here of inventions and innovations that they have. But first, let's look at the big picture. So it happens 1914, 1908 to 1918. Fought mainly in Europe. And early on, America was not in it very, very early. Most of the war, World War I, was fought without America participating. So early on, it was Great Britain and France versus Germany. Okay. Now it was they at the time they called it the Great War. They didn't call it World War I, of course, because they didn't know that there was going to be a World War II. They called it even at the time the Great War because it was a big deal. It involved a lot of countries, really the whole world almost. It starts with the assassination of somebody that you've never heard of, right? Not an important person, the Archduke of Austria, Austria being in Europe. So in June 1914, he's driving in a car. He's a famous picture, or I don't know if it's really painting or a photograph. I don't know. I can picture it in my head. Open topped car, 1914, right? Very, very early type of car. And driving through a parade through town. And this Archduke of Austria is assassinated. Okay.
Oh,
Not
I'm sorry. What does this word mean, assassination?
an assassination. Tolulope, what is an assassination?
An assassination is an act of murder, primarily primarily a murder of a leader,
Right.
which holds a lot of power, by someone who is opposed to their ideas and politics.
Right. Right. So it's a murder of a leader, right? If somebody killed me, it wouldn't be considered an assassination because I'm not, I'm not very important. But if a president, and there's been 4 times in American history the president has been assassinated. We think of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy in the 1960s. So if somebody important, a world leader, is killed, it's called an assassination. Now, if the president gets killed accidentally in a car accident, that's not an assassination, right? So like you said, Tolulope, it's purposeful, it's for a reason, generally a political or national reason. They can be from another country, they can be from your country. So the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. Now, not very important, but what happens is one country is the whole world was tangled up in alliances, right? So Germany was allied with, I think Germany was allied with Austria, or I'm not sure, but my country is allies with your country, which means we're friends, which means if you go to war or if somebody harms your country, then I need to come in on your side because we're allies. Our countries are allies or friends. So I forget where the assassin was from that killed the Archduke of Austria, but they were, from a different country. And some countries around the world then enter in and say, hey, we're on Austria's side. And some countries come in and say, we're against Austria. And so within 1 month, the whole world is just sucked into a war, even though it's a tiny little thing that started it, an assassination of a leader in Austria. Not something that the whole world should be upset about, but because they're all allies, they get sucked into it together.
I'm sorry, did they find out who killed the leader of Austria?
Oh yeah, he did it right in the middle of the street with a gun. Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but no, they knew. Somebody ran up to his car and shot him. And I think said.
I mean, was this killer from Austria, some of that country, or was that someone from other country?
I believe it's somebody from another country. So then, and I can't. I wish I knew, but those two countries are then at war. Okay, sure, I understand that. Yes, Austria, you should be at war then with that country. Somebody from that country assassinated your leader, but that doesn't mean that Britain should be involved or Russia should be involved or any of these other countries. But since they all had alliances, they all just got pulled into war together. The thing with World War I is people say it was silly to happen, served no purpose, and the end result didn't serve a purpose. It was kind of a war for no real reason, looking back historically. So, that's the way a lot of historians view it. It served no purpose. It wasn't. It was a goofy reason to start a world war. So at the beginning, America was not involved. We must have not been allies with any of these other countries. Oh, let me ask, did somebody just call in? Who is that there?
Yes, Vanessa Reimer.
Okay.
Sorry, late.
Okay. All right, Vanessa, no problem. We are just discussing, are you online? Can you see the screen?
I can't do I went to get the GoToMeet app, but in my tablet, it doesn't have it in the Play Store. It has Zoom. I have Zoom for all the other classes, but this one, I couldn't find the GoToMeet app.
Well, yeah, you don't need the app. You should be able to just click on the link and just do it like in a browser, like Chrome.
Okay, so I'll give that a try then.
Okay. Yeah. If not, if you just listen, I guess that works too. Today we're talking about World War I and World War II.
Okay.
So yeah, try that. Okay.
All right, I'll give it a try.
Okay. So at the beginning of the war, America wasn't involved. So they said, our official stance was we were isolationist. We wanted to be isolated as a country. We did not want to be involved. So America was isolationist. But eventually, that's 1914. By 1917, 3 years into a war, America, I don't remember the details, but America ultimately declares war, enters in on the side of Britain, and I think Russia was involved on our side. And they fight the war. It's mostly in Europe. There's only 19 months left, a year and a half left in the war. Okay. So that's the big picture. Let's look at a few of the ways that the world changed. It was the first time really that American or the combatants in a war used chemical weapons. They used poisonous gas. Here they're just burning in a barrel, burning some chemicals, which then the wind blows. Okay, because of that, they needed to invent the gas mask. Now, this picture on the left, bottom left, is one of my favorites because it tells you exactly what the world was like. Okay, they were still using donkeys and mules and horses, right? It was still a world where you used animals to pull stuff, and yet, they have gas masks on. They put a gas mask over the muzzle of a donkey. I think that tells you this is a modern country or modern time, but it's not that modern. Because, I mean, when was the last time you used a horse or a donkey to pull anything, right? I think that's a really interesting picture. They have the machine gun, which then can shoot, 100, I don't even know, hundreds of bullets super fast, right? That was a new invention. That's going to change. If the other side of the people you're fighting has that, that's going to change how a war goes. And barbed wire. And we're going to look at barbed wire here in a second. But barbed wire was a new invention for World War I. And they used that barbed wire in the trench warfare. Okay, so the bottom right-hand picture you see here, they would dig trenches across a field, and I'd be in trenches, and so then on the top two pictures, you dig a trench, and then you stand in it or kneel in it, and then just your head and your gun are poking up out of the trench. That's a new thing. It's not been done before. And then, across the battlefield, a quarter mile, maybe a full mile, is the other army's trench. The thing with trench warfare is it's, we have you ever heard of somebody describing something as entrenched? If you and I are arguing about whatever, and I'm not changing your mind, and you're not changing my mind, and both of us are just stubbornly holding on to our own views, you might describe us as entrenched. My attitudes are entrenched. Okay? The root word there is trench. It's E-N-T-R-E-N-C-H. Entrenched. It means you're in a trench. If you're in a trench in this trench warfare style of fighting, you don't really move very much. You don't really take over new land because as soon as you jump out of your trench, you're standing on the ground and the other guy's going to shoot you because you're taller, you're bigger. So you hide in a trench and don't move, and they hide in their trench and they don't move. So not much changes. Okay, so it's a very frustrating way of fighting a war. You also have tanks. Sometimes I suppose you involve tanks. Maybe that's how you get across the field between the trenches without getting killed. This is the pretty basic, world's first type of tank. But that's a new thing for World War I. They also had they're using airplanes for the first time to see the other side, and they're also dropping bombs and shooting from the airplanes. But these are like old style airplanes. So World War I is it's a big change from the Civil War, which was just 50 years before. Okay, so they fight. There's lots of battles. It's very long. I don't really know the details. I'm not great with World War I. But anyway, the end of the war, they have the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, the treaty is signed. Treaties are always called the Treaty of whatever city they're signed in. Versailles, I think that's France. Is Versailles France? I think. They sign it in Versailles, so it's called the Treaty of Versailles. It's the treaty that ends World War I. So the terms of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, Britain and France took control of German colonies. Germany was kind of the instigator, the problem maker in World War I. So generally, we wanted to kind of punish them, okay, for their bad behavior in World War I. So Britain and France take control of German colonies around the world. Africa, I think mostly Africa, but German colonies around the world. Britain and France take over those. There's economic punishment of Germany. They have to pay some what you call reparations, basically fines. They have to pay punishment, so their economy suffers. But mostly America was disappointed with the outcomes and returned to isolationism. They go back and they're like, yeah, okay, that World War was not kind of worth anything. And so America goes back to isolationism, and World War I historians now and people then also viewed the war as mostly pointless. It didn't really accomplish much. It was started over a goofy reason. Oh, Vanessa, I'm glad you were able to log in. Very good. So that's World War I. Now, the reason I like to teach World War I in a discussion of World War II is because World War II happens because of World War I. Okay, so let's look again. So economic punishment of Germany coming out of the end of World War I. Part of that treaty is that Germany was going to be punished. Their colonies were taken away, given to other countries. Their economic punishment. Germany is weakened because of World War I. Okay. That is going to lead to World War II. So what is this a picture of here? My little title screen for World War II. What is this a picture of? Who's in the middle?
Adolf Hitler.
Adolf Hitler, the guy holding his hat, hand up. Okay. What's the symbol behind his giant banner back here, little banners here? What's that symbol?
The swastika.
Right, the Nazi Party swastika. Okay, that is a symbol. It's actually an ancient symbol. You can find that in, I think, Asian symbols. It's been around for thousands of years. I think generally in the Asian symbol it goes the other direction, but it's an ancient symbol, and the Nazi Party used it as their symbol. So now Hitler. This picture doesn't happen right away. This probably happens in the 1940s during World War II. So let's get from World War I in 1919, the Treaty of Versailles ends World War I. Let's get from 1919 to 1940 when World War II breaks out. So you're in Germany, the economy stinks, people can't have jobs, there's shortages of food, your country's also humiliated because you just lost World War I. You feel humiliated, you're being beaten up on the world stage. Nobody likes Germany. Your economy stinks. You can't get a job. Okay, unemployment is high. And so then you have leaders who are going to rise and say, hey, I can solve this problem. I'm going to make Germany as great as it once was. The world is going to love and fear Germany again. And the person who spoke the loudest and was very convincing in the way he presented himself was a young Adolf Hitler. He started in a low level of the government and then worked his way up through the government until let's look here. So I got a little bit of a timeline. I'll share this link later, and it does have a video for Adolf Hitler. Oh, you know what, folks? Let me answer the door. I think I might be a minute or two, but let me see here. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'll be right back.
I can't hear anything.
Hey everybody, are you still there?
Yes,
Okay, sorry about that.
still
I
here.
I have a delivery from Lowe's. I bought some lumber. I'm going to be working on my deck, and they said it was going to be delivered today, and they said it was going to be between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So they had 12 hours, and they had to. I got a knock at the door. They had to deliver it right now during this class. That's unbelievable. Okay, so thank you. I apologize. I really apologize. Thank you for waiting. So World War II. I'll share these details. I'll share this document later, and you can click on this video. It's a nice little history video, kind of the rise of Adolf Hitler, and it describes how he took advantage of people's anger in Germany. You know, they felt insulted by how World War II by World War One, how it ended. They were economically crushed after World War One, and he takes advantage of people's anger and comes to power. So 1933, he becomes Chancellor of Germany, kind of very near the top of their government, 1933. He forms the Nazi Party in Germany in the 1930s. And in 1939, Nazi Germany invades Poland. Okay, he wants more territory. He wants more land for Nazi Germany. He says that he's created a Third Reich, like basically kind of a kingdom almost, a nation that's going to last 1,000 years, he says. Okay, and people are on board. Regular German people are on board and excited, and they feel like, okay, Germany's going to be great again. And so he invades Poland. At first, the British people and the British leaders, Britain is a big leader in Europe at the time, and other European countries are like, okay, well, we don't really like that the Nazis invaded Poland. Certainly the Polish people don't like that Nazis invaded Poland. But their first reaction early on, when the Nazis were taking action, invaded Poland, and then invading other Central European countries, they said, okay, well, it was appeasement. If you appease somebody, you make them happy. Okay, so they at first had a strategy of appeasement. They said, well, okay, we don't like that the Nazis invaded Poland, but let's just let him do that. Let's just give Germany Poland, and then maybe he'll be happy. Maybe Hitler and the Nazis will be happy, and they'll stop. Maybe they'll be okay. Okay. Well, I mean, if you're a parent, you know how that works. If your child asks for some candy and you give them candy, what are they going to want next? They're going to want more candy, right? No child has ever eaten a candy bar and said, "Oh, that was delicious. I'm now satisfied." You know, people want more and more and more. So the Nazi Germany, when they invade Poland, they want more. Their goal is to take over the world, take over the earth. So then you have to start fighting back. So eventually, 1939, 1940, they start fighting back. Okay. Now again, like World War I, I'm not keen on memorizing all the battles, and there's very famous, very important battles through World War II. But let's look at kind of the big picture. You have what is called, now I just said no battles, but you have one period that's called the Battle of London, or they called it the Blitz, which is a German word. A blitz, they called it blitzkrieg, which is a super fast lightning attack. Okay, they would attack and then disappear. And it was the Blitz of London, the Battle of London, from September 1940 through the following May 1941. You have nightly attacks where German planes, in the top picture there, would fly over London every night, just about every night, from September to May, okay, through the fall, through the spring, and bomb the city of London at night with no lights on their planes, and they would get over London and they would just bomb. They would drop hundreds of bombs every night, okay, demolishing a new section of the city where people are living in the city of London, England. So you have nightly blackouts. It was illegal to light a light in your house at night. You couldn't, there's no street lights. They turned out all the street lights. You were not allowed to even go outside and light a cigarette outdoors. They wanted no lights outdoors so that the city at night from the air would be invisible and the bombers would not be able to see where the city is. Okay, so that was part of living, and then the bottom picture, you have children looking at bombed rubble. Part of living in London from September to May. We have, right now we're living through something with the lockdown and social distancing and the stores are closed. But for the battle, I mean, none of our houses are being bombed at night, in the dark of night. So I imagine it'd be a terrible, scary time. People raising families, working. Okay, these aren't soldiers being bombed; it's the city of London. Okay, so that happens, and then it ends in 1941. Early on, now Nadia, correct me if I'm wrong here in my understanding, but early on, Russia is allied with the Nazis. Okay.
Yes, it took place.
But in 1941, a year or two into the war, the Nazis.
Actually, Russia. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Russia doesn't want to speak about that, and we were not that cool about this. That Russia had agreement with Germany, like it was something what Russia did before Hitler attacked Russia. Russia attacked some kind of countries. I forgot. Was it Poland or something?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Czechoslovakia. And Russia did this too. So Russia was on the German side in 1939.
Right.
But they don't want to talk about this.
Right, early on, the Russians were allied with Nazi Germany. But then Hitler, being a very ambitious person, he really wants to accomplish his goals. He says, I'm going to invade Russia. He turns on Russia. They were allied, they were friends. He turns on Russia and invades Russia, breaking the treaty that they had. Now, Russia
Yeah. And
suddenly,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
And it started really close to the city when I was born. I was born in Pinsk city. It was 2 hours away from Brest city where first battle was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, Bretsk was one of the early battles, yeah. Hmm. So you have Russia in a weird position. They had been friends with Nazi Germany until Nazi Germany attacked them and invaded Russia, trying to take over Russia. Now you have, immediately you have Russia trying to now be allies with Britain, who was fighting Germany. So Russia fought on two different sides during World War II. At first, they were with the Nazis until the Nazis turned on them and tried to invade and take over Russia. And then Russia turns around and starts fighting against the Nazis with Britain and later the United States. So that's an interesting thing, I think, pretty unique in history. You have Russia changing sides during World War II. So let's look at the United States side. So at first we were officially neutral. We wanted to stay out of it, to not take part in World War II, kind of very similar to World War I. At first they remained neutral. Although they were supplying the Allies, the British side was British and French and everybody allied with them, we called the Allies. They supported them with supplies. Okay, we weren't fighting with them, but we were helping them indirectly. Then, still not in the war, you have a military draft in 1941. We get the Uncle Sam famous "I Want You" poster. Now we're still not at war, but then if you were living in the United States, you think, well, what if we're not at war? If we're not officially in this war, why are we having a military draft? Drafting young men to build up the army, right? It's kind of suspicious. Kind of makes you think we're going to be in this war sooner or later, right? Why would they build up the army if they didn't think we were going to be in the war? So then you have December 7th, 1941, famously a date that will live in infamy. There's a military base, an American military base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Hawaii at the time was not a state, but it was part of the United States. It was a territory. It wasn't a state, but it was part of the USA. And so we have a base there. Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay. Now, Japan, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, was fighting alongside the Nazis. Okay, there's kind of two halves to World War II. There's the half that happens in Europe and the half that happens in the Pacific Ocean. They call it two different theaters, the European theater and the Pacific theater. Kind of two wars going on at the same time, but the Japanese are on the side of Nazi Germany. Okay. In Hawaii, you see the picture there. There's the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was a surprise attack from Japan. These planes flew the whole way across the ocean. Okay. And they were kamikazes. So what is a kamikaze? It's a Japanese word. What is a kamikaze?
Is that like a suicide bomber?
Yeah, it's a suicide bomber, but not like today we have these awful terrorists with suicide bombers wearing vests and they blow themselves up. This is a plane. You're flying a small little fighter plane, and you crash your plane. Instead of dropping bombs, you crash your plane. It's a kamikaze. Okay, I think they did drop bombs, but there was also kamikaze attacks in Pearl Harbor. They attacked the military base in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. What the Japanese purpose was to scare the U.S. into remaining neutral. They said, hey, don't mess with us or we're going to hurt you worse, right? But obviously that's not how the American spirit works. If you attack us, you're not going to scare us out of fighting. You're going to make us fight you, right? So I believe the next day, I believe December 8th, 1941, you have President Franklin Roosevelt speaking to Congress. He makes a famous speech that describes it as a day which will live in infamy. And I think that next day, December 8th, Britain or the United States voted Congress, because the Constitution gives Congress the ability to vote to declare war. Congress declared war the next day after Pearl Harbor. So America is in the war. Doesn't last terribly much longer, but America does fight some big fights, particularly in Europe, but also lots of fighting going on in the Pacific theater. So how does it end? The Nazis fail in their invasion of Russia. Famously, I believe historians say no one has ever succeeded in invading Russia. Nadia, is that true? Is that a?
I think so.
Yeah, I believe,
Yep.
I believe over history, over the last hundreds of years, different people, different groups and countries have tried to invade Russia, and everybody always fails. So you can't. Russia is a gigantic country geographically.
Yeah, it's a big country, and not just because of that, because Russian people will fight till the last drop of their blood
Right. Yeah.
for
So
their country.
yeah, so even
It's
the Nazis fail in Russia. I think Hitler also tried to invade Russia in winter, which is not a good idea. So end of 1944 in Europe, the Nazis were trapped. The Allies, the British and US coming in from the west in Europe, the Russians were coming in from the east in Europe, and so they were trapped in Germany. They were surrounded. And so I don't remember the date. I feel like it was in April 1945. Oh yeah, it was late April 1945. Adolf Hitler in his bunker in Berlin, the capital city of Germany, in his bunker in Berlin. He knows he's trapped. He can't win. He can't even, get out of the city. So he actually marries his girlfriend, and then the next day kills himself and her in his bunker, in it like his bomb shelter. Okay, so that's how Adolf Hitler dies. Doesn't die in battle, doesn't die commanding his troops or leading an army. He dies hiding, trapped in his bunker. He commits suicide. So Germany then, shortly thereafter, surrenders unconditionally. They say, they don't demand anything, they don't ask for anything, they just surrender. May 8th, 1945. So you have these newspapers, it's VE Day. There's two famous days that we're going to discuss here, VE Day and VJ Day. VE is victory in Europe. So Nadia, you said May 9th is the big celebration in Russia of
we
the end
always
of.
celebrated. Yeah, May 9th. It was always like Victory Day.
Yeah, so either May 8th or May 9th, I don't know what we consider VE Day. But it doesn't mean it's the total end of the war, because there's still a lot of fighting going on in the Pacific. But the fighting with the Nazi Germany, and quite a lot going on in Europe, all those big battles, it ends let's say May 9th, 1945. And that's why, Nadia, you say in Russia, they celebrate the end of World War II. But it is not over yet. So you have this famous picture of the sailor in New York City kissing the nurse. It's a famous picture. But it's not over yet, because you have the Pacific Theater. Now, these are all the different battles. Okay, the flash stars are the battles. You have, we could look at all kinds of things on this map, and this is over a long period of time. But there's lots of fighting going on against Japan and the Japanese, and other allies of theirs. But the Japanese take over Korea, Thailand, a lot of these islands, and there's tons of tiny little islands. Iwo Jima, of course, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Midway Island, out in the tiny little island way out in the Pacific. All these tiny little things Japan is trying to take over and fight the Americans, mostly the Americans, over in the fighting in the Pacific theater. Lots of airplanes, lots of boats, tiny little island battles. Okay, now, so how are we going to end that? Does anybody know what brings that to an end?
No, I don't know. I just know United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki city.
Right. So
But
that's
I don't know, was that the end or some different?
right. So the atomic bombs dropped. They say, how are we going to end the Japanese? Nadia, just like you said, the Russians will fight to the last drop of blood. Japanese are very proud. They're not going to give up. They will never surrender. They said, we will never surrender. We will fight until every last Japanese soldier is dead. So we said, how are we going to make them surrender? We don't want to fight. They've already, I don't know how many people had already died in World War II. The American president, Eisenhower at the time, said, how can we make this end? We need to end this fighting. So they had a new technology, a new weapon, the atomic bomb. So on August 6, 1945, they drop the first one from this bomber. I think the first one was called Big Boy, the bomb that they dropped. And this is a picture. I don't know how they got a picture. This top left is the picture of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in Japan. Kills 100,000 people instantly. Civilians, they drop it on a city. Kills 100,000 people instantly. And then, okay, so then they're like, all right, well, Japan's going to surrender. Well, guess what? Japan doesn't surrender. So 3 days later, they drop a second atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan. If you've ever seen anything about atomic bombs, they just flatten cities. Everybody just is killed instantly, vaporized, like it's a big deal, right? So they dropped 2 atomic bombs in 3 days, in 4 days' time. And so August 15th, 1945, Japan does surrender, thus bringing an end to World War II. So that's the fighting. Now there's all kinds of battles, all kinds of famous battles, and very important things that happen in World War II. But that's the overall story of World War II. Now, another thing that's happening during that time is the Holocaust. Who were the Nazis? Who did they view as the bad guys in the world? Who was their enemy?
Like Jews?
Yeah, the Jewish. They felt that, now this is before, outside of battle, okay, they obviously were fighting the Americans and the British and the French, but the Nazi view of the world was that Jews and the Jewish people are bad, can't be trusted, are evil, and must be handled. And the way they were going to handle that problem, they decided, was to eliminate them, to kill all Jewish people from the earth. So the Holocaust, today, when you say Holocaust, especially if you capitalize it, it refers to this period in time where they killed all the Jews. But Holocaust also is another word. It's the word existed before this. A Holocaust is like in religion, in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, you have all those prophets who would burn their sacrifices. It's a sacrifice that's made through burning. And so I don't know exactly how the word Holocaust became associated with this period in history. It'd be interesting to know who put that label on it. But when you capitalize it, it refers to this period, the killing the killing of the Jews. But I have a good definition here. It's the systematic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime, government, and its collaborators. The systematic, state-sponsored persecution and murder. This isn't, accidental killings. It's not killing in anger. I'm just going to murder my neighbor. It's systematic, state-sponsored, which means the government is the leader. Murder of 6 million Jews. They also they wanted to rid society of every person that was bad, that needed, that wasn't good for society. They viewed Jews, gypsies, which is it's an ethnic group in Europe, gypsies, physically or mentally handicapped people. If you were identified as homosexual, they viewed something as wrong with you and you need to be gotten out of the world. And political prisoners. If you spoke against the Nazis, they were going to kill you. So at first they put the Jews into ghettos, into a couple of city blocks. They would block it off. You were not allowed to leave. And those couple of city blocks in your city was where the Jews lived, in apartment buildings. And they would, they'd provide you with goods, but they contained the Jews at first in ghettos. Of course, these ghettos weren't fancy. They were overcrowded. They were dirty. And then they said, you know what, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis during World War II, during this period, they said we need a better solution to this problem. Just containing these Jewish people isn't good enough. We need to eliminate them. So they created concentration camps. They would round up your people, your Jewish family, your whole town, all the people in the ghettos, living in the ghettos in the city. And they said, come with us. We're going to move you to the countryside. And you'd say, okay, you'd pack a suitcase, you'd get your kids together, get your family. Everybody's very scared, but you'd stay together, pack a couple of suitcases, just what you can carry, and they'd get you on a train. And they say, oh, this train's going to go out, and we're going to put you in a town, and the Jews can all live together in a town out in the country. So you'd get on a train in box cars. It wasn't a fancy train. It was just in box cars. But you'd get in, you'd be terrified. You'd have your kids, you'd have your suitcases. And then you would get to a place, and some of the places looked like train stations. And there'd be gardens and a nice little house there, a little building, like a train station. And they'd walk you through the train station, and it would be a concentration camp, and you would never leave. Okay, so they had it look like when you got off the train, when the Jews got off the train, it would look nice, so everybody would be peaceful, and nobody would be worried, and nobody would fight back. But when you get through the gates, it's not nice, and it's a prison, and there's a good chance that they're going to kill you. So, and they would kill, with firing squad. They had gas chambers. Some of the concentration camps were work camps. They would make you work and create, make things, make clothing, make shoes. But others were just extermination camps. You would go in and they would kill everybody off that train, and then they would, have mass burials. So this is the Holocaust. This was part of, when you think of Nazi Germany, this was a central part of it. And a lot of people,
can I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I add something?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most people think just Nazis, their army killed Jews in this war. But as far as I know, in Ukraine, it was some Ukrainian soldiers. They fought against Soviet Union army, and they fought by Germany's side, and they killed plenty of Jews in Ukraine.
Right.
And Ukrainian government doesn't want to talk about this too out loud.
Right. A lot of this I mean, it's easy for us to sit here in the United States and discuss it today, but if your nation, your people, were involved in it, yeah, people don't like to talk about it. I mean, there's still people that deny that it even happened. They say, you know, the history's made up, the pictures are made up. That's not what happened. And so no, people in Europe are definitely I agree. Can imagine they do not like to discuss this. And it wasn't just the Nazis; it was anybody fighting with the Nazis. And what happened was also they would have the Jews. You know, they wouldn't kill all of the Jewish people that got off the train. They would enlist some of them to work at the concentration camps, helping people get in the gas chambers, or you know, uh, just terrible, terrible jobs. A lot of the jobs at the concentration camps were worked by Jews, and that sometimes there was only a couple of Nazi soldiers at the concentration camps, kind of leading things. Of course, they're the ones with the guns, so they have a lot of power. But no, 6 million Jews were murdered through basically death. You know, they get off the train and it's these just death factories. And not all concentration camps were the same. They all had their own level of terribleness. But when you talk about Nazis, you know, the central idea of Nazism as a belief is that Jews were, everything that was wrong with the world is because of Jews throughout history, because of the Jewish people. And that was their view. A lot of, you know, as you find through history, a lot of these dictators like Adolf Hitler, you need, if people are going to follow you, you need an enemy. And so you need to tell people, I'm saving you from something. And so he pointed to the Jewish people and said, I'm saving you, and we're going to work together and rid the world of Jews. Anyway, so that's a central view. So sorry to, you know, bit of a, more than a bit of a downer today, but what are the effects of World War II? Long term, the U.S. it strengthened the federal government. During a war, the government always becomes more powerful in our lives because the government is we are all supporting the army, which is the government. I mean, the army is part of the federal government. So it strengthens the federal government. Unemployment goes from 13% in the United States in 1940 to 2% in 1943. So unemployment goes down. Wars are actually very good for the economy. During the war, women worked as 1/3 of the U.S. civilian labor force. You have this famous Rosie the Riveter poster from the Saturday Evening Post magazine. And women took over, as happens in every war. Well, before, I don't know about it today, but as happened historically, women, you know, the men go off to fight the war and the women do their jobs. And so here's a woman working as a steel riveter, you know, to build a building, as you know, with steel rivets and steel beams. So the women got helped, you know, got some power through World War II. The other thing that people don't like to talk about is through 1942, and I'll wrap up here soon. I know it's 12 o'clock. You have the internment camps in the United States of 110,000 Japanese Americans. And this is something that isn't always mentioned in World War II, but this is in the United States. We were attacked at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. And so people looked around and they said, oh, my neighbor is Japanese American, you know, not from Japan, but Japanese American. And I know there's some, you know, there's a family in town, or a family, or a lot of people in the city next to my city are from Japan. And so can we trust them? Can we trust these Japanese Americans? Because now we're at war with Japan. So who are they going to be faithful to, America or Japan? And so people looked at Japanese Americans, you know, just American citizens, American people who had came from Japan originally. We all came from someplace, and they didn't trust them. So they took them. It was very peaceful, terrible but peaceful, and they put them in internment camps for I don't know how long. I think over a year or two. And here's a picture of them. A lot of them were out. I think there was 11 camps. They were out west in the western United States, out where there's a lot of space. And they build these giant bunk cabins, and that's where 110,000 Japanese Americans, they were taken from their lives across the country, and especially on the West Coast, because that's the side of America facing Japan, facing the Pacific Ocean, California, and they were just taken from their homes and put in these internment camps. And then after a while, after the war was over, they were released, and the story went on. But that's something that not a lot of people know about. I think it's a shameful, I believe, a not good part of American history, that we rounded up American citizens because we said we didn't trust them, just because what they looked like and where we felt they were from, and we stuck them in basically prison for the duration of the war. I think that's crazy, and a lot of people don't. It's not a big part that people know about. Have you guys ever heard of that, in the Japanese American internment camps?
I read about this just recently, and actually, I can understand these people. So I will not say anything bad about them because we don't know how we will behave in the situation like that.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I
You're
will
right.
not judge. Yeah, I will not judge American who did not trust Japanese.
You're right. I think you can make an argument that you can certainly make an argument, and I did. I mean, I just did a minute ago, that it's
It's easy to say I would not behave this
right.
way.
No,
It's
you're right.
easy to say, but who knows?
No, you're definitely right. I mean, these are normal Americans like you and me, just regular people. I view myself as a very regular person. Regular people held these views and took action. Um, and historians also always write about ordinary Germans. The German people in the 1920s, 1930s, between the space between World War I and World War II, as Hitler took over the country and led them, to believe they were going to take over the world. They're not, those people are just like you and me, but they were sucked into something. Ordinary German, regular people became Nazis and fought the war, and if not supported, then at least looked the other way while 6 million Jews were being killed. So no, you're definitely right, and that's a good reminder. As we look back on history, it's easy to say this was terrible and shameful, and some things are just terrible and shameful. But when you're discussing the actions and decisions of just regular society, maybe we shouldn't judge. We can judge the actions. We can say the outcome is bad, but yeah, to judge people is dangerous. You're right. You're right. So, I know we're a little past noon here. Any questions?
No, thank you. I really thank you for this lesson.
Yeah. I think if you compare as you were saying, Nadia, the Russian perspective to the American perspective, in both of these wars, America entered them very late, or not at first. America in both wars, World War I, World War II, tried to stay out of it, tried to not get involved, and then were forced to be involved. So that's an interesting perspective. Russia, I think, played a much more major role probably in both of these in both of these wars. So, all right. Well, I appreciate the discussion. I'll share this. Maybe there's one or two videos. Maybe I'll email out with it. This is a good, I know it's super fast, a good flyby discussion of World War I, World War II. And of course, World War II, you could have a discussion. It leads to what? We have atomic bombs, we have
To,
America, we have
to the
Russia.
Cold War.
It leads to the Cold War. The Cold War doesn't happen without World War II happening first, and World War II happens because World War I happens. So, I mean, throughout history, you see things are interrelated. This happens because something already happened. The Cold War happens because of World War II, because of the end of World War II. You have Russia, the United States, they fought on the same side, but that doesn't mean they were best friends. And now you have atomic bombs, and Russia gets their atomic bombs up and running very quickly. And so you just have fear and distrust, and of course, communism come in, and that's a big part of World War or the Cold War. So yeah, my next thing here, I'll share this, and you're welcome to look it over. The next thing we would discuss in this presentation is the Cold War. So I'll send it out. Actually, Vanessa, let me give you my email, and then if you send me an email, let me type that in the chat here. Yeah, Vanessa, if you send me an email, then I'll send you an email with this information, and I like to follow up. Actually, Vanessa, have you done this? Is this your first class with me? I can't quite remember. I can't remember if you logged in before. Well, so yeah, thanks for logging in. Tolu Lope, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, but I do want to say I'm like you. It was hard for me to study World War One. I found I was pretty good with World War Two when I first started studying it, but so I wrote a comparison chart of both wars so I could see how is exactly how World War One led to World War Two
Oh, okay.
and those and the similarities with both wars, because there seems to me to be a lot of similarities in both. Like you said, how the United States entered the war sort of late, um, and the other all the other factors with the Central Powers and the Axis powers. It's really interesting, and there's a whole lot of information that we don't talk about here in America.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes on. There's only so much, like my presentation today. I'm sure I skipped major things. Obviously the battles, but no, people do study this stuff for a lifetime. So, but I think it's interesting, and yeah, it's most interesting to me to think, okay, these Nazi soldiers. What they did was wrong and terrible, but I don't think they were evil. I mean, some of them were evil people, but I don't think, the average Nazi soldier was an evil person. I think they just got wrapped up into terrible world events, and it happens throughout history. Not everybody, there are evil people throughout history, but not everybody who's doing bad things is evil. We can all think of a friend or family member who got sucked into something that they shouldn't have, and
Yep.
it's interesting. So I appreciate your time. Sorry I had to step away, but thanks for rolling with that with me. So next week we can jump forward to 1970 and look at the Kent State shooting. Then and one of these days maybe we'll talk about something happy. Yeah. So all right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you.
guys. Thank you, ladies. Have a great day. Have a good week.
You
Yes,
too.
you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.